Well, hello again from Dispensa Chats. This is Kyle, and I have a guest with us today, Gregg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Kyle.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to have Gregg on the show. He just recently got back from a trip to Egypt, and I was interested to hear his story about the energy and the awesomeness of the ruins, and y'all went to see a lot of different places. So, as usual, we'll let this conversation be free-flowing, candid, and see where the universe takes us. So, Gregg,
All right.
let's hear about this trip in Egypt, brother.
Wow, Egypt. What an experience. I've always had this thing about Egypt where something about it, the mysteries of Egypt, the magnitude of it. And I knew that if I'm going to Egypt, I started introducing myself to guys like Graham Hancock, John Anthony West. I thought those are the kind of guys I want to go with.
Yeah.
This summer I was at a festival introduced to Robert Edward Grant.
Yeah.
Then went to a conference that he had in a guy headquarters in Boulder. And wow, he talked about his work on encrypting Da Vinci's work and how it was tied to the pyramids. Very compelling evidence, and talking the same kind of language as Hancock, John Anthony West, about how the pyramids were built with a specific design, measurements, how it's, different theories about exactly why. But Robert Edward Grant is a guy that really spoke to me. He's a polymath, numbers guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about all the different measurements and basically has designed a blueprint to say, here's what the pyramids are all about.
So this was a special trip because it was a very small group of people. What'd you say, maybe 100 in all?
Yeah, probably about 70 participants and then some faculty, maybe about 100 in all.
And Robert Edward Grant was the kind of the sponsoring celebrity, if you will, for the trip.
Yeah.
And it was over 10 days total?
Yeah, it was 10-day total. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, because I was going to go on the trip, but some things came up, it was kind of private, if you will, like the ruins that you went to go see. It was set up to where you were the only group really there, so it was very intimate. You didn't have a bunch of other tourists around you. So can you kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I guess I'll just start with the first day that we gathered on a Saturday for welcome reception, first presentations, and then the next morning we had a presentation, and then we went out to the Sphinx.
Oh, nice.
And it was a private viewing of the Sphinx. So we were down below with the Sphinx, our group, and you could see the other tourists were up above. Felt very special at that point. And so our guide, Muhammad, was the main guide. And he immediately started talking about Robert Schoch and erosion theory and the timing of the Sphinx and dating of the Sphinx, how it differed from what the traditional view was.
Now, his position, just so everybody knows, is the Younger Dryas period is when the Sphinx was constructed, not according to current Egyptology, right?
Yeah, where the Sphinx was constructed prior to that.
Prior to the Younger Dryas period.
So
okay.
the erosion evidence shows that it was at a time when there was significant water in that region, and that would have been at the Younger Dryas period.
So I'm just curious, did you lean up and put your hand on top of the Sphinx paw or anything like that?
Yeah, there was some touching involved for sure.
Yeah. Did you feel anything when you did that?
I didn't specifically feel the energy, but I think I'm still learning how to feel the energy.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Still really, really cool. There was I can't remember the whole setting, but I was meditating, and towards the middle-ish part of my meditation, I had a vision of the Sphinx come to me, and it was like I was really there. It was so cool. It's like as if my eyes were open and I was seeing the Sphinx and smelling the air. And so one of these days I will get there, and I want to see it so much. But that is so cool that you got to do that. Yeah. Now, you went inside all three of the pyramids on the Giza Plateau?
All three of the pyramids. So we did that Sphinx in sort of the morning around noon hour, and then we went for lunch, then came back to the pyramids at 5 o'clock. So we had from 5 o'clock till 11 o'clock for the pyramids, and we split up into two groups, so we're probably about 35 each. And we started at the little pyramid, Munkari, and that was super cool. We walked in there, and there was a chamber that was just recently opened up to the public, and Robert had never been in that chamber before. Smallest chamber, about the size of this porch maybe, and then it had some 6 cubby holes offsetting it. And so we did an activation, what Robert called an activation. So we gathered, joined hands. He led us in a prayer invocation, and it was a beautiful moment, the energy, and we did some chanting, and then we moved on to the main room of that pyramid, and Robert immediately started seeing some pictures on the walls, and he basically saw the Garden of Eden.
Wow. And you mentioned earlier a tree of life also.
Yeah, so you saw a tree on life on one side, tree on life on the other, and then the river. And he's quoting sort of some of the biblical scriptures of that description of the Garden of Eden. And
when you say he saw it, almost like a vision coming off of the wall.
Yeah, so it's something that I think you need to have a higher level of consciousness to be able to see those. I could see a little bit, but others seem to be seeing it a little more clearly than me. All I know is it's for real. Like it's easy to be skeptical to say, well, is that really a vision or an image on the wall? And I think the way that Robert describes it is we raise our consciousness, then we can start to see things. And Robert is very big into geometry, sacred geometry. And when you start to train your eyes to be able to see polygons within different structures, then your eyes start to pop open and start to see what's in front of you.
Well, I just remember one of the recent Dispensa events we went to, he showed a really awesome video that some lady put together all about the pineal gland and the Fibonacci spiral, and how it's really everywhere you look in life.
Yeah.
But nobody looks to see it. Nobody's aware. But once you're awakened to that, you see it everywhere.
And that's where the beauty is.
It is.
And that's what makes the art so beautiful. And that's what makes nature so beautiful. When you look at flowers, and all of a sudden you're looking at them with a different appreciation.
You do. Let's go back to the pyramids. I too am just infatuated with Egypt's ruins, the pyramids, trying to understand why they were built, when they were built, how they were built. And so in some of my research, they talk about just when you walk inside those pyramids, you can feel the energy. It's like a vibration. And you mentioned Robert Edward Grant doing an invocation-evocation ceremony, and you said the word activation. So I'm just curious, these pyramids have been said to be just perfect resonance of some frequency.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that if humans are inside of this vessel, so to speak, and they're chanting, there's a rhythmic action, right? And there's a vibration that's induced inside this vessel, and then it almost like it reverberates that.
Yeah.
So did you sense any of that?
Oh yeah, for sure. When we were in the King's Chamber, the sarcophagus in the main chamber there, everybody had a chance to lie down in the sarcophagus. And
now this is the Grand Pyramid, right? The Great Pyramid.
The Grand, yeah.
Okay. Now I remember that room. The room is kind of rectangular, really tall ceiling, smooth, no hieroglyphs inside. And then right at the end, there's a or sarcophagus, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the one that you guys had a chance to actually get inside.
Yeah, so somebody lies inside, and then others around, we would just keep a low hum vibration. And the sound is incredible, the resonance, the reverberations, and the acoustics in the room. Everything gets magnified. And then so many individuals with us. I just had my eyes closed. And the voice this person had, I couldn't tell it was a male, female voice. It just sounded so sacred, so sort of shamanic, and it was just the room was. Everybody was just in a different state. It was powerful.
So I've laid on a rock before. We were in Cancun on a trip with the family, and outside our hotel they had these 2 granite slabs that were polished and kind of hollowed out. And I just remember looking at it and saying, I'm going to lay down on this. And it was so cool, the energy that I felt. It was like there was an energy from the stone coming into my body, and there was energy from my body being received back into the stone. So I've often thought about that experience, and you talking about laying inside this sarcophagus. I have seen some pictures of some places that look fairly remote. People don't understand why they were built, and I probably don't have the terminology right, but there are some people that talk about them being stargates, where it's like a cliff face out in the desert somewhere, and there's a doorway carved that leads to nowhere. It's not a functional door, but it's carved in.
Yeah.
And I've often wanted to be able to go to those places and get into a trance-like state and meditate inside that opening and see maybe it is a portal somehow, some way, because of energy vortexes, ley lines of the universe or of our planet. And then there's another one I saw that looks like a coffin-sized box carved out of this giant rock that's just in the ground, right? It's smooth because of years of erosion, but right in the middle of it, there's like a coffin-sized hole carved, maybe about 2.5, 3 feet deep, 6, 7 feet long, 2, 3 feet wide. And I want to go there and try to lay inside of that and get into a trance-like state and meditate. And it's a playful, whimsical nature that I have, but I also am very, very curious about the lost knowledge that we, Graham Hancock talks about. We're a culture of amnesia.
Yeah.
And I love that because it paints such a perfect picture to help us better understand all these questions we have about why is this built? Why is this built? We have no idea how they did it.
Yeah.
So anyway, I digress, but
yeah, that's exactly what intrigues me is that, in this world of chaos and our world of civilization where we're this world of progress, kind of like, well, I question our progress at times, and I think about the amnesia that we have for some of the technologies that we understood about not only our own bodies, but about this whole body, this whole universe, and how we become sort of, I guess we're living in this world of separation where we're all sort of individuals competing. And since sort of Darwin's theory of evolution is sort of this theory is that we have to be better than everybody else, and we're always comparing ourselves against each other. And I think the ancients probably had a better way of living in that they were living more in harmony and balance with the world. And I think some of like the pyramids, for example, is something that was left behind for us specifically to help us find the answers we seek for human consciousness and understanding of why we're here on Earth. And I think it's a much more compelling story for me to follow that trail than to follow the American success story, which I did for years. And I came to the end of it and I'm thinking, okay, now what? And I'm thinking, now what is going back to learning about what I should have been learning about years ago. But
what's cool is we are fortunate enough to have come to that awakening now, as opposed to at the end of our life and not having opportunity. I want to talk about your comment the other day that these other ruins along the Nile River are places of healing. I want to get to that, but before we move off of the pyramids, you have a shirt here, and I wanted you to hold that up. Yeah. This was a shirt that they gave you at the tour?
Yeah, so this is a tour. So it's Alpha Chi Omega.
Okay.
Expedition 2023.
And what does the Alpha Chi Omega symbolize?
So the significance of that, and that's Robert Edward Grant would talk best about that, but sort of the beginning and the end and everything in between.
Okay.
And he's found, so specifically he found something etched into the pyramids on the sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. He found that like a couple of years ago. Now that's the most studied room in history, and no one's ever found it, but he found this, and you can, like, I can see it with my own eyes. Like it's not something that somebody just etched in, after the fact and graffiti or anything like that. Like this is, they talked about the makeup of the rose granite, and it's not something that you can easily do. And so it's there. He also did the measurements of it. And he goes through the numbers and the measurements and the significance of they're specifically placed in that specific, like that dimension, that magnitude, because it's telling back the story of why the numbers are so important, because it's telling us sort of the building blocks of life.
So on the other side of the shirt is kind of something we were discussing about the energy centers of our body and how Robert Edward Grant had utilized that with this overlay, and kind of talk about what he shared with you guys.
So this is the work that he started with Da Vinci's works in encryptions of Da Vinci. And so Da Vinci back in...
You want me to hold it for you?
So what he started with Vitruvian Man.
Yep.
And he figured out that there's a circle within the square, so that's important. I won't get into that. I guess I'll just say that the punchline here is that he's showing that this is a blueprint of the human chakra, the energy system within the human body. So that's what the pyramid is representing. One facet of the pyramid is, so it's showing subterranean chambers in your root chakra, and then going up King's Chamber, and then based on this diagram, he said, well, there should be 3 more chambers in the pyramid, they're undiscovered chambers. Well, shortly after he made that revelation, a team from Japan and France came in with new technology, scanning technology, and they determined that there's a void at that place where the root chakra, Robert said the root chakra would be, or pardon, not the root, the throat chakra.
Throat chakra, yeah.
And so sure enough, there was this void there, but they couldn't get into it because the Egypt, the keepers of the Giza Plateau said that, well, you can't go blasting or creating new any holes to try and find this chamber. So until you find a passageway to it, it's just, we know it's a void. So the week we were there, when we were visiting the Sphinx on the Sunday morning, Ostroff, who is the Director General of the Giza Plateau, came and was talking with us and Robert, and sharing that there's new information coming out, press release which came out 4 or 5 days later, about this discovery of a new passageway, that they've now found a passageway to this root chakra, so they were able to send cameras into the passageway. And at this point they didn't actually get into the chamber, but they show a picture of that passageway. It's eerily actually looks like a larynx when you compare it to a larynx.
Like if they were scoping down your throat or something, it looked the same.
Yeah, so it's a throat chakra. Okay,
wow.
So it looks like, so who knows what the next couple are going to reveal, but it's starting to reveal itself. I think we're at the stage in our collective consciousness that we're looking for these things and we're finding them.
Well, it'd be really cool if they can start, further extrapolating this theory and possibly find the, I guess it would be the 6th and 7th, right? Because it's only based on 7. That the 8th center is above the pyramid.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And there's some discussion on that because the top of that pyramid is actually flat. It doesn't go to a peak, and then so there's always, was that just a mistake or did somebody dismantle it? And so that there's some discussion around, well, it probably never was to be completed as a point, because part of it is that it's signifying, and I can't describe this properly, but it was done on purpose to say that it was left on top, because that represents maybe the higher consciousness.
Well, I think Dr. Joe even talks about this in his lectures during the 7-day week-long retreats, that we have no control. The only centers we can control are 1 through 7. We have no control over the 8th center. It's truly, and that's why I think he does that invocation, evocation. It's simply, we are requesting the universe to bring energy down through the 8th center. And so I've always found that curious, we visited last night about Matthias de Stefano. And how I had found one of his videos on Gaia talking about the Nile River, and how there were stations, if you will, places along the Nile River that corresponded directly with, like the Nile River was our body, or call it the spinal cord. And there were places along the Nile River that were designated as healing centers, if you will, to the participant who went there. It would activate that center, and it was a rite of passage or an initiation to perfection as they moved along this Nile River. And so you had mentioned when you did the Nile River part of this 10-day trip, you were on a riverboat, you were going up the Nile River, and you were stopping at these different locations. So kind of visit a little bit about what that was like and how they talked about them being healing centers.
Yeah, I mean, that after the first day, just seeing the Sphinx and the pyramids, I thought, well, that's enough for a trip.
You're like, I'm good.
We got more to go. And
Yeah.
then, the temples were less of interest to me going in because I wasn't so interested in the Egyptian dynasty, but then seeing the temples up close and personal, and our guide Muhammad was a hieroglyphics expert, so he would go through us and so much information to absorb. But I picked out bits and pieces, and the stuff that sticks in my mind is the stuff about the healing, and he would show the different hieroglyphics and how it showed that they would have these, they typically have these little bags and things like that that signify that they're different medicines. But the people would come from all over to be in these temples to receive healing.
Now, this is meaning in antiquity or even in current day?
In antiquity, and they're probably not so much anymore, I don't think.
I wonder if they could be activated,
Yeah.
or if there's a missing component or set of components.
I think all that stuff is coming, because I think at the end of the day, with as technologies, and technologies are great. We've got so many conveniences in life, but the greatest technology is this thing right here. We're sitting here with this amazing technology that we're starting to understand better, but we don't understand the powers that we hold within. And there's a lot of people out there now sharing some information, some wisdom that is helping lead us to channel those energies and use these bodies for what they're meant to do.
So you went to 7 different sites?
Yeah, I think it was about 7 sites. Yeah,
along the Nile.
And it's interesting because wasn't aware of Matthias's views on it before I went there, so I would have been a lot more engaged in trying to pinpoint which are we talking about specific chakras here.
Yeah.
But each one of them has their own. Just the magnitude of them. Again, a lot of them have a base with sort of some megalithic rocks and structures, and then they're built on top. And so there's a lot of them have been damaged over time and
possibly pillaged.
Like there's definitely graffiti and pillage, and there's plastering to cover up. There's definitely there's probably reasons why people in power would have wanted to cover up some of those hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
So I think in general, though, there was, like Muhammad talks about, so there's the Younger Dryas, and the flood is sort of the common story around that. But Muhammad, our guide, talked about a solar flare impact that probably some kind of force of energy. He figured it was probably around 10,500 instead of like earlier than the Younger Dryas.
Well, there's a lot of photographic evidence I've seen that I find very compelling, where on one side of a statue, you can tell that there was a significant amount of heat. Like the stone itself, I can't remember the technical term, but you can tell it was like a blast of some kind of heat energy or something that hit one side, but the other side is fine.
Yeah, so we did see some of these amazing, like there's a couple huge statues that have been damaged, and how you would damage that. Like there's no man-made device that could damage those. There's some kind of huge force that would have caused that kind of damage.
Did you get the feeling that there was, like, as you go and traveled these ruins, you mentioned large megalithic and then smaller construction on top.
Yeah.
Did you get the feeling, I know you've probably heard this, I know I have, but did you get the feeling in here like this is truth, where it's like two different, at two different times with a separation, that there was a different race of people, or even just a different time where this megalithic construction happened, and then another group of people came after and kind of took it over, right?
Yeah.
Did you get that feeling?
I
at all?
think I had preconceived notion too. I think,
Yeah.
but I definitely have that feeling when you see it up and close and personal. Yeah. So I think my preconceived notion just comes from going to Machu Picchu in South America and seeing the ruins there, and then seeing how a lot of some of the Catholic churches would be built on these beautiful foundations. And,
I mean, Machu Picchu is very obvious. You can see how they got the larger monolithic puzzle pieces and everything, and then they got smaller cobblestones almost built on top. It's like you can tell it's two different types of construction. But nobody really talks about that over in Egypt, and I'll go back to the Great Pyramid. I hear a lot of people say that it's awesome, it's beautiful, and then when they actually go there in person, it's like they're just blown away at the magnitude of it. How was that for you?
Oh yeah, you can look at pictures in the books and watch videos, documentaries, but when you're there, it is definitely something that you can't encompass with a video camera. There's no doubt in my mind that there's pretty sure that those structures were built with some technology that we can't even imagine exists because we've closed our minds from using the power within.
There's a lot of people coming out now talking about how they use sound.
Yeah,
some kind of frequency.
I think that one makes a lot of sense to me. And there's all kinds of stories that the Tibetan monks use these horns where they can levitate large rocks and just basically changing the structure of making the rock lighter so that you can move it. And on a smaller scale, it's being done. Cymatics has worked as using frequencies in water. I think that, there's our human potential to be able to move large stones is there. And
seems so primitive when you think about it right now. Like we're talking about this awesome technology. We're talking about our level of amnesia, that what we have forgotten from antiquity, and then we talk about moving stones. It just sounds so archaic, right? But it's and why do they do it? Like I'm going back to what you said about this being kind of left as a testament, right? For us, because it's almost like they knew we were going to have amnesia. Weird, but that's an interesting concept. And so why would they, if they were so powerful and wonderful and they had all this knowledge, why would they build something out of rock? Well, it lasts forever. And that's something else that I find so awesome, is that these structures have been here for thousands of years, have gone through earthquakes and other types of natural disasters, and they still stand. You know.
And like some of those statues I was talking, like they're 700-ton statues, 1,000 tons, and these structures were damaged by some force, but yet the pyramids are still standing.
Did you see that unfinished obelisk?
Yeah.
Did you go see that?
Yeah, we did.
Did you see how it looks like they were making ice cream scoops out from underneath? I've seen those pictures where it's like scoop marks, right, out of this hard stone. I was like, how could they have done that? What is your impression?
Well, it's funny because Muhammad first took us into a room at the unfinished obelisk, and he shows us a National Geographic video, and it was done showing how it was done.
The rounds, the rock
stones and chipping away.
Ding,
and
ding,
so
ding, ding.
Muhammad shows us. So he says, here's one of these rocks. So he took us out there. You guys start chipping away and see how far you get.
Wow.
And so he talked about sort of the absurdity of the theories that were there. And he says, okay, here's this obelisk. He says, the harbor's over there. We just have to move it over there. And it's like, it's uphill, and how are you going to move this huge thing and apparently float it uphill into the river? So Muhammad was really good about injecting a bit of humor and just kind of pointing to the absurdities of some of the theories that are there, just suggest that it was done through slave labor or whatever. And he's talking about the mortality rate of those guys doing those scoops underneath, because what they had to do is free that giant structure from the ground. So somebody had to chip away at the end there. He says the mortality rate of those guys, 100%.
No kidding. It's like,
you're the guy.
Tink, waiting for it to fall on you. Wow. But he's making a joke, right? Because he's saying that that's probably not how they did it.
It's probably some other technique that would have been used, which would have been a little more efficient and a little less lethal.
I mean, you think about the large amount of stone they had to generate, the quantity, the size of it, and then now they're saying that, you know, a lot of that stone came from over 11 hours away by car, 60 miles an hour.
Yeah.
That's a long ways away.
Yeah.
You know, and so it baffles me.
I mean, it's possible it could have been done with slaves and ropes and pulleys. Anything's possible.
Yeah.
It's probably not as likely as maybe some other technology that existed.
So what else did you go see? So we talked about the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, and the ruins along the Nile.
Ruins. So there's some temples, like Dendera Temple was one. That was the first temple that we went to view, and that was a nighttime viewing from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. We had a private viewing. That was amazing. One of the things there is they have a Zodiac, which is on the ceiling of one of the higher level chambers. And, you know, so obviously the ancients knew something about astrology. They knew a lot about the stars. They knew about the precessional equinox before, you know, the stuff that we were finding out in the 1500s, 1600s. Rediscovering, I think, is more the word to use than discovering. Yeah. So, I mean, it's uncanny how they would have been able to have these depictions of the constellations. The actual, that Zodiac symbol is actually a replica because it was taken by the France. The original was actually in the Louvre, apparently. So that's with a lot of Egypt. There's some stuff was sort of damaged and pillaged. But so that Zodiac, the French were nice enough to give an exact replica back to Egypt so that they were able to put it back up in the ceiling.
An exact replica. That's cool. And then what else did you go see?
So that was Dendera Temple. Then there was a few other temples. With the Valley of the Kings was one which where the pharaohs are buried, their tombs, and so something like King Tut's tomb is there, which I didn't actually. You had to pay extra to go into that one. I didn't. You know, it doesn't intrigue me as much because it's more about the gold and the material possessions. That's the way I think of King Tut. I think of King Tut as being Steve Martin's son, King Tut.
Now, all that stuff is not in there anymore, right? It's in a museum somewhere, right? His tomb is not filled with that stuff still today.
Not exactly. I didn't go into that tomb, so I just know the other tombs were. I mean, they're majestic buildings and carvings, and like more carvings into the ground is what they are. But you go underneath, and it's pretty amazing the hieroglyphics and the depictions they have on the walls.
Well, let's talk about that. So here you are. You're talking about King Tut and other kings, and so you're saying that it's dug into the ground.
Yeah.
And the common ideal was that these pyramids were tombs, and now we're slowly gravitating away as far as the common understanding that these now were not really tombs. But current Egyptology, I think, still supports that notion that these pyramids were tombs. Am I not correct in that?
Yeah, I think their fantasy is still that, like, when they open up the throat chakra, that they're going to find something there. Robert's expectation is that there will be nothing in the room other than, I think he was going to say there might be a chair or something like that, a stone chair. Yeah. So the tombs weren't meant as some kind of storage facility or something too.
But I just think when you talk about the Valley of the Kings, that kind of supports that these pyramids were not meant to be tombs. That the actual tombs were like what we do today, dug into the ground.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah. The Valley of the Kings. The other interesting thing we did that morning, we took a hot air balloon ride over top of them before we went and visited them. So that was really cool.
Really?
Yeah, there's like about 80 balloons went up in the air, and we had a couple of our own balloons.
They give you a parachute?
No, it's pretty safe. We felt pretty safe.
Wow. I've never been in a hot air balloon. Always wanted to.
That was my first time, actually. And I thought, well, I should do. There was extra. It wasn't part of the trip, but most of the people paid the extra and did it. So it was well worth the money.
So would you go back?
Oh yeah, I'd go back to Egypt. having a hard time coming back. Although, like I think I mentioned to you, like time really expanded for me. I was there for a week, 10 days, but never felt like, what.
You said it
the
felt like
trip
a
is-
month.
Yeah, at least the trip was. I mean, to me, it was like I felt like I had met everybody. I really had deja vu. Like I felt like I'd met a lot of the people before, and that we were just returning. That we were all coming back to meet
That's
again,
cool.
and then we're going to go back out in our own separate ways again, and maybe someday we'll meet again.
So if you did go back, what would some of the things be that you kind of have regrets? Maybe like I should have done this or that, or I want to do this a little more next time.
Yeah, there's no. I don't know what I don't know. I guess.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that intrigued me, one of the guys that was on the faculty was a guy named Larry Paul, who's been, he's like an explorer. Like he's been doing this for 30 years. That he's 72 years old now. He was a political science teacher. He's a professor. But he's kind of like a real takes. It's tough in Egypt to really do any type of measurements or to try and do any type of investigation. They kind of keep it pretty close to themselves, that they want to do all the experimentation and investigation. So Larry's a pretty interesting, he's got some interesting stories. And so I say that because if anything I regret was not staying around another 7 days, because Larry was going to do his own little research expedition for the next 7 days after. And I thought that would have been really cool because he's, he's, I guess, one of the things that he discovered, which is really cool, is the measurements when you go looking at going from subterranean chamber. The measurement from here to that next spot is like in meters is 29 meters, and the next one is like 94 meters, and you add those all up, then it comes to the speed of light. It's like crazy.
Whoa.
Once it gets to the King's Chamber, it's like the speed of light. And then that goes. Sorry, I'm rambling, I'm tangentially speaking here,
it's
but
fine.
rambling on. And that's a big part of like just the coordinates of where the Great Pyramid is situated. When you drill down to the exact point where the sarcophagus is in the King's Chamber, the latitude is 29.99. So, but it's a speed of light, exactly, speed of light in meters per second.
Yeah.
And then you look at the longitude, and you look at that number is 31 point something, and you look at it, what does it really mean? But when you look at that as you think of a compass in 360 degrees, and you take that as a ratio of the 360 degrees, it works out to 0.864. I don't quote me on the numbers.
Right.
But it comes in as Robert says, the decimal points aren't important, it's the numbers that are important. So the 864 combination that's the diameter of the sun, and it's also 864 is the number of seconds in a day. So 60 times 60 times 24 is 864.
One occurrence. Okay.
Yeah.
2 occurrences. Now you're starting to get somewhere. But time after time after time, it's like this cannot be a coincidence.
There's all these coincidences. That,
Yeah. And like Robert Edward Grant says, I don't believe in coincidences. So, okay, you have all these things. Well, that tells us they had a wonderful knowledge of the astrology of our universe, of the planets, of the sun, and how they could incorporate all that. Again, beating with the rock and the chisel.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'd like to talk a little bit about you. You've shared with me that you're on a spiritual journey, and this trip was really going into the unknown for you. You've never really done something like this before, and it was just a really awesome time for you on your spiritual journey. So kind of talk about that, if you don't mind. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's sort of the culmination of a year-long journey that started. I didn't even really know I was on a journey. It took me a while to even figure out I was on a journey, but it started March 7th of a year ago, and so it started with separation with my wife. We went to a counseling session, and we decided about a half hour in that we need some time apart. And so it was kind of undefined. It's okay, how much time apart do we need? And sort of wanted to fix myself within a couple of months, and it just kept on going. And then I realized I'm on a journey, and I've just had the chance to be exposed to a lot of different thinkers, a lot of love containers. Joe Dispenza was one of them. I heard from enough people, Joe Dispenza, and said, I got to do this.
Well, that's where we met. Was at the Orlando Pure Love event.
Pure Love.
Yeah, that was an awesome event.
Yeah, that was so good. I think, if I were to do it again, I'd probably advise not to do it maybe as rushed as I did, because you have to do the intensive progressive course, online courses in advance, probably about 25 hours of video at least. Yep. And I basically did a crash course, like I was cramming for university courses.
Hey, it was your time, you know? It happened when it happened.
I showed up and got in, and what an amazing experience that was. I think I was just overwhelmed by, first the feeling that I got in there, a little bit awestruck that, like, Joe Dispenza, that's Joe Dispenza right there. Yeah. And then once you sort of get over that, and then you start to meet the people, 1,850 people from 57 different countries, and you realize you're part of something special, and it's just like, I'm so blessed to be here. And so we met there and had a few good discussions, and and the great thing is going to these events is, man, you can talk about some far out stuff with people and just, you know what? Yeah, I get it.
Well, you have inspired me because of your openness for possibility. We were kind of visiting about that, and Dr. Joe even says that at the end of some of his meditations. Come back to a new body, and how he ends his meditations, and he's like, and be open to new possibilities, and my wife and I often talk about that, and some of my other friends. It's like, if you just keep saying yes, you'll be shocked. Like my wife and I have talked about the people we meet at these dispensing events and the opportunities that come. Like, I just a year ago would have never imagined sitting here with you doing this, and hearing about the things I'm hearing about, and then you've opened up the possibility to come along on some of your journey, and I that's so special. Like, it's your special journey, but then to share it together with somebody is cool too. So just keep being open. That's why I say you inspired me, because sometimes I'm pretty close-minded. I'm like, oh, no, that's kind of scary. I don't know if I want to do that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that for every event that I've gone to, there's always been this sort of fear of, okay, are you really sure you really know what you're doing here? Should you be doing this? And I think about some of the events I've gone to. It's like, but I just put myself out there and did it. Like, another really cool event I went to with Aubrey Marcus. You're not familiar with Aubrey yet,
no.
But you'll check him out. His podcast. He's got some really cool guests on his podcast. He's doing a lot of good work. He had a festival this summer. I was inspired by the speakers that were going to be out there. Matthias was there, Robert Edward Grant was there, Zach Bush, Charles Eisenstein, a lot of great thinkers, and let it have music component to it as well. And just like an ecstatic dance kind of vibe, and just the whole messaging was all about. It was about embracing the feminine too, and accepting our sisters and treating them with respect, and give them a safe environment where we can all dance and feel the love together. And it was, sobriety was encouraged. And for me, I used alcohol a lot of years of my life for courage, liquid courage. And it was just so freeing to be in amongst a group of people that you just like letting your body flow and not worried about what you look like when you're dancing and not trying to impress anybody. Again, a lot of the stuff I talked to you about is about me trying to impress other people my whole life, whether it's in sports, whether it's in music, it's, and trying to put on a show and trying to be somebody. And I was trying to find, after taking this year of experience, can I just try and be myself?
Impress yourself, right?
Yeah. And it's funny because I was also thinking about how, as an actuary, that was my career for 29 years. And I always got this, people always said to me, you don't look like an actuary, you don't act like an actuary. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I probably wasn't even looking and acting like myself because I was trying to play some role. And but I don't regret it because it was a great life too. Like I enjoyed working in the corporate world. I had a lot of good years. There was a real sense of community with the team and the people that I worked with. And I think for me, I've come to the realization now that my takeaway from that was my skill, my what I relied on was bonding with other people and with sharing with other people and helping other people as best as I could. And so that's what I want to continue doing in the next stage of my life, is hopefully I have enough assets aside that I don't have to worry about, manifestation. And my definition of abundance has totally changed from
Yes.
worrying about how much I have to worrying about just how comfortable I am with what I have. And once I start changing that framework, I still fall into like worrying about what's going on with the stock market, my investments, and will it be there? Like, am I going to be destitute and broke? But I've also over the last year learned how to live within means that, I used to worry. I used to, want to stay at 3-star hotels and above, but now, the other
Now
night
you're sleeping under the stars.
I'm sleeping under the stars. The other night I didn't even bother pitching a tent, because why even pitch a tent? I'm just going to sleep under the stars. I told you, right? And so it's just, I'm happy to, I don't know, I'm happy reconnection with nature. I'm rambling on. Reconnecting nature has been like crucial for me through this. I mean, I've always been connected to nature, but through this last year, I've had a lot of moments of solitude in immersed in nature, interaction with animals out in the wild. Just such different appreciation for flowers, for plant life, for mycelia, for mushrooms, for this whole network of this beauty that we have around us that my eyes were kind of closed to because I was so focused on chasing the dollar and filling my bank account. And I had some things that happened that forced me to a combination of relationship breakdown and some financial challenges just really put me in a very scary state.
You're not alone. A lot of people have to wait for something like that to spur them to action.
That's unfortunately what it is. You can't tell it. Unfortunately, that's what it takes. And unfortunately, my wife was a brunt of that. Like, I became a bitter old man through the whole COVID stuff. I mean, that stuff was like mentally threw me up for a loop. What I saw happening and what I thought we could have been doing from a public health perspective. But all that's aside, I think now I look at it as a blessing. I look at COVID as a blessing, and it's a learning and I'm trying to still make sure that I keep those learnings close to me, that I don't fall off and being angry and bitter about it. So I don't want to be an angry, bitter man.
No. And it's hard to be that way when you're practicing this work, like you're saying, you're seeing so much beauty and going off into the unknown. Like we were talking just earlier this morning about when I first came into Dispenza's work and started having my spiritual awakening, I was like, wow, this is fantastic. The world is my oyster, And then as we move through the practice, we get to a point where we're like, we don't care about that stuff anymore. It's like our desires change. Like you could be told, you can have any of your desires you could ever want. Well, guess what? They don't tell you that your desires are going to change as you grow.
Well, working with plant medicines, that's one of my main things is the medicines only give you what you need and not what you want.
Yeah.
And that the ability to let go and to surrender is tough when living at least I have lived in a life of control, and you can control your destiny. We can control a little bit. We can control our choices and our actions, but the outcomes, sometimes we have to just accept whatever outcomes come, and that's sometimes tough. I'm trying to learn right and wrong. Is there right and wrong? Is there good and bad? All these polarities that the world that we live in. It's all this learning stuff that I've absorbed as now, after a year of this. I guess for me, this is kind of like a kickoff for me to say, okay, here you are, Melly. You've experienced this over the last 12 months. Now you got to integrate and start sharing, just sharing yourself with other people first, and eventually the goal would be to be of service to others. I don't know exactly what capacity that is, but I think it's hanging out, meeting people in this type of community, like this podcast, for example, for you, is something you start up with. Who knows where this goes, but for right now,
it's fun.
Having some fun with it.
I am.
As long as you're having some fun with it.
It's not about the money. It's about the chance to help at least one person, And I love that you're willing to share your testimony a little bit. We talked about that, just how there's very few guys that are open and willing to do that. It puts us in. If you have your macho state going on, it's like, no, I'm not weak. I don't want to show any sign of weakness. But, really and truly, I have enjoyed letting that go. I'm not perfect. I haven't let it all go. But being more open and willing to share, I guess you could say, our feminine side, and that's fun. It's relaxing.
Yeah, there's a lot to that. The balance of the feminine and masculine within. And I think there's so much that was suppressed, and growing up as a male, big boys don't cry and don't show your emotions and all those things. And man, I've cried a lot in the last year, and it feels good. There's a lot of release of a lot of trapped emotions, and there's still a lot of work to do, but at least I feel like I'm working in the right direction and around the right people to support me through that journey.
So what's the next steps? Any more fun trips on the? Oh, you're going to go up to Austin and spend some time there, and maybe see Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah. So I've always been a huge Joe Rogan fan. Probably started watching him probably about 8-9 years ago.
Yep.
Listening to his podcasts, and he was very influential in exposing me to different people. So I always wanted to go see him at the Comedy Store, and never got that. I've seen him live on stand-up. I've seen him a couple of times live stand-up, but I want to see him in a small comedy store.
Yeah.
And so now he's got the Comedy Mothership, which he's got in Austin. We've been talking about doing it. And when I was in Egypt, one of the girls, our intimacy therapist, talking about sacred sex, she's from Austin.
Yeah.
So I asked her about the Joe Rogan Theater, and I Googled it, and sure enough, it just opened like last week. So, of course, tickets sold out within a second. And I don't know exactly how I'm going to manifest getting into the building tonight, but I'm going to show up and see my new friend Kat. She's going to hook up with me, and we're going to see if we can get and see Rogan. That's tonight. And then after that is I'm on my way to Boulder, back to Gaia headquarters, which is one of my favorite places. I've been there. This will be my 4th visit in the last year.
Well, keep me updated on that, because I would love to go to Gaia headquarters myself and meet some of these awesome content creators,
Yeah. So, and then after that, it's probably a couple of weeks just to process a lot of the stuff and head back north and talk to my wife and see where she's at. And, ultimately, whichever way it goes, I have a better sense of who I am, that I can articulate some of my thoughts and beliefs and dreams with my wife and see where we're at. And either we're going to be thriving better than ever, or we're going to decide to amicably part and figure out it's scary to think, okay, restart. That's part of it. I wanted to break away and have chance to sort of rebuild. And we were together for probably it'd be 22 years, so long time, a lot of history, a lot of great experiences together, and we just started to separate a bit, and unfortunately that's part of the rebuilding process, is that we have to go through some pain to figure out what our next stages in life together are. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking forward to getting resolution in that. Either way, whichever way it goes, is just to be able to talk to my wife with an open, clear heart.
Mm-hmm. Remember, my friend, you are the creator of your life. You're the creator of your life. Isn't that awesome?
It's just, I lived in a lot of fear.
You lived in a lot of fear?
A lot of fear. A lot of my choices, actions were out of fear. And it's moving into this world of love and trust, acceptance. And
you find a lot of peace in that, don't you?
Yeah. So I want to find that peace within. I want to find that with my partner. And I want to find that in the world. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's something. I was something on my mind, and I'm trying to remember it now. But just manifesting. I was going to mention the changing boxes meditation on Dr. Joe's website. Have you ever done that one?
No.
He does it at the retreats too, and I found that one to be very powerful. In the meditation, you get into the blackness, and then about halfway through, he wants you to imagine the box that you're currently in, and then imagine basically changing that box to another scenario. And everybody may do it a little bit differently, but when I do that particular meditation, when it comes to the point of imagining the box you're currently in, it's almost like I imagine a strip mall with, several glass windows and a door, like you're going to go inside a store in that strip mall. And I just imagine myself kind of walking out of that store, standing back and looking at it. And then you know how on an iPhone you can like swipe the photos and you see all these photos flying by?
Yeah.
I kind of imagine like this infinite number of possibilities, right? And I'm just swiping through. Okay, which one do I want? And then when I end on that one, I step back into that frame.
Yeah.
And it's been real powerful.
Wow. Yeah.
So everything to like your relationship, to a career choice, to where you're going to live. I mean, it's infinitely possible, whatever you want to try to change. I've really loved that changing boxes. Now, it's imperative, obviously, that when you're done with that meditation, you walk as if all day. Mm-hmm. And if you ever start to find yourself walking in that old box, you got to go back and do it again.
Yeah.
So you have to carry that as if mentality.
Yeah.
Heart, mind, soul.
And that's the crucial step, is to experience it, right? I mean, it's
really
so easy to think about it, read about it, and think, okay, that makes sense, and then I'm going to try that. But when rubber hits the road, you fall back and start worrying about things that you shouldn't necessarily be. Focus your attention on as if.
I have to say, I'm really proud of you, man. You encourage me in so many ways, as far as living in this unknown, wanting to really experience and letting go of these fears. I have a lot of them inside of me, fears, worries, uncomfortable things, that pop up. And all I can say is, like you, the journey has been awesome where I'm willing to let go. Dispenza said something I just saw the other day where he's like, you will surrender to the point of your comfortableness. And he's like, that's why I push you to that point of being uncomfortable, like at his retreats and stuff. He's trying to get us to that point, and then once you can breach that, once you can get past that, awesome. He always says that awesome things will happen. And so this go ahead.
And we touched on that too, about how sometimes in the mystical it's scary because it's so powerful, and you just sort of want to go back and
go back to what you find known, right?
And then you go, but I want to go back there, but then you can't go back there because then you've got out of that deep state of meditation. But it's pretty cool when you get those glimpses of that higher power.
It's like little candy nuggets leading you along the trail, right?
And when you're ready for it, it takes some time. I mean, everybody probably has their own stages of how long it takes them, but for a guy like me, it's taking some time to open my mind, as much as I feel I have an open mind, but to open my heart, to open my body, to just accept the craziness, because it is pretty crazy.
Greg, I used to be so impatient, and I found more patience now than ever, and an understanding that it happens when it's the right time. And when it happens, it's beautiful. You can't force it, and that's something I have always tried to do, is matter to matter, Newtonian thinking, what's the logical, path.
They start getting analytical. Am I doing this right? I always interrupting myself from having an experience because I'm worried about, am I doing this right or am I doing it wrong? It's like, just let go.
I told you I set intentions before every meditation. I say, and it's going to sound funny maybe to some people, but I say, I am a master. At the beginning of a meditation, I say, I am a master. And I believe it. And then I say, I am surrendering. I just set it out there. And it seems to really help me in my meditations. It's almost like a reminder, but then it's a true affirmation. You're setting it out there to the universe. And cool things happen.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that should be it for now, unless there's anything else you'd like to throw out there.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably tons I could throw out. I just like,
So the next time we talk, I want to hear some awesome. No, we're going to be on a journey. We're going to do this from Egypt next time.
yeah, for sure. I'd love to do a follow up because I got some work to do. I've done some work, and the work will continue forever. I don't see this ever stopping, but it's exciting.
It is exciting.
Like I find I'm back on the path again. I had, just some things that knocked me back, knocked me down, but you reframe it and you look at it. When you start looking at it, it's like, yeah, that happened for a reason. And as long as I'm finding the right reason why, I think it's just giving me the comfort to know that I'm going in the right direction again. It feels good. So
I believe the next time we talk, you're going to probably not refer to it as work anymore. It's just going to be your lifestyle.
Yeah, right.
And I'm starting to get there. At first it's like, oh man, I got to meditate this and that. Yeah. Now I'm just like, I don't feel right if I don't. I'll take a break every once in a while. Like life will come in, but for the most part, it's every day. And it's not just 20 minutes here or there. It's an hour, hour and a half. And then right before I went to Cartagena, I did 3 weeks of 3+ hours a day because I really wanted to try to raise my vibrational energy before that event. And like I said, it's not really work to me anymore. It's just something I want to do. And I feel frustrated or upset when I can't fit it in.
Yeah.
It used to be the other way around. I used to get frustrated when I had to do it. So.
And it's amazing how you can find the time in your day too, right? We're always worried about not enough time. But when you set your priorities and it becomes a priority, it's, like you say, it's not an obligation.
You find time to take a shower, right? You find time to use the restroom. You find time to eat food. In fact, now what I'm doing is I'm eating less and meditating more. There's science to that too. But you're right. It's priorities. It's what you really want to do. Like we get questions on our email and in the comments of these videos, and they're like, what meditation to buy, or how can we afford a meditation?
Right.
And, a meditation online is $30 roughly, give or take a little bit. And to some people that might be a lot of money, but if you prioritize, and don't go buy those drinks at the gas station or whatever for a few days or something like that, it's just all about where your desires are and what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's an investment, and there's no right or wrong. There's no solution. There's no one solution that's going to work for any. Like you have to find your own solution ultimately, and a lot of that involves trying different tools and modalities. There's so many different tools and modalities out there, and just trying to be connected with probably things that are you see other people benefiting. You see anecdotal evidence, which through Dr. Joe. I mean, I haven't met a person that's gone to Dr. Joe that hasn't had great things to say and positive improvements in their life after experiencing that. So just going to that alone, I know I have a buddy that was trying to talk, and you can't force somebody to do it because they look at it. It's like the progressive course costs $299 US.
Yep.
A lot of money. You have to do that as a prerequisite for attending a week-long event. But man, if you're not going to do it today, when are you going to do it? So start figuring out a way to get that $299 US and figure out how to, again, that's if you think Dr. Joe is a path you want to take, but it's a path that many people have taken. It's a proven track record. Cost a little bit of money, but
you remind me.
He's a real deal.
Yeah, he is, and you remind me of my first steps in this whole thing, and me being a science major, science degree, company. Everything I do is science based. I was intrigued by the science. The first video I saw, it had the thumbnail of like, you can make all the money in the world, one of those kind of real catchphrasey thumbnails. And it was him. Somebody had kind of put together a video, 10-minute long kind of interview mix-up thing. And I started watching it. I'm like, what is this guy all about? You know what I mean? It's like, And then I started digging a little deeper, went down the YouTube rabbit hole of different videos of him out there. And I started really hearing all these buzzwords that I liked, which was stuff about science. Like we're doing this testing, and we've got proof now that this happens and this happens. Yeah. Like for instance, one of the ones I had seen early on was telomere length. I'm like, okay, what's telomere? So I go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Oh, telomere is a biometric aging that they can test. And so now I'm proving these things myself. I'm doing my own third-party kind of testing to see. And so I have 2 telomere tests that I've taken. My wife has taken 3 different tests. We've done things like before we go to an event, we'll do a telomere test, and then after the week-long event, we'll come back and do another telomere test. And I don't want to give the results out yet. I'm going to go do my 3rd test, and then we'll do a video just on that. Just in the I will let a little sleeper out there, or whatever, a little tidbit that it's proving to be true.
It's awesome. And that's the beauty of the science. That's the beauty of integrating the technologies that we have today to be able to, and that's why the time is right now. Like, back in the 1600s, 1700s, when some of this stuff was coming up again, 60s, the stuff with the love moon was starting to come up. But now we've got the technologies to help people to show it scientifically, and the supernatural exists. And that's, I got to keep rambling, sorry, but
that's
I don't
all
know
right.
to close it off.
No.
But like Rupert Sheldrake was one of the first guys on my journey that I spent 5 days with him and his family. And there's a scientist that, he was total atheist, as all scientists are, or
most
promoted to be, right?
Right.
So he basically had this spiritual awakening in the 70s, and he's ever since been ridiculed and ostracized by the scientific community for having some beliefs in some supernatural power. And here's a guy now with the advance of quantum mechanics and that we're all wave and we're all energy, and we're not matter, we're energy.
Yep.
And so now all his theories and people are starting to embrace this knowledge. And so it's such a beautiful time to be in now that, we've gone through this period of separating science and spirituality, and now it's all coming back together, and it's happening really fast, and it's changing a lot of the paradigms and a lot of our thinking of what we thought was real and where we're working towards in the future. So I'm just tickled to just be sitting here doing this podcast with you in this beautiful setting, driving through, and just knowing that we're part of something big right now. This is part of, I just feel it's a big part of history of mankind, that something big is happening. I don't know exactly how to describe it. There's a lot of bad, like it's the good and the bad, the polarities. There's going to be a lot of dystopian stuff that's going to continue to happen, and it's trying to shield ourselves from getting that having us drag us down, and keeping our heads, our consciousness, thinking forward to the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, as Charles Eisenstein says in his beautiful book. Just quoting guys randomly.
No.
These are guys that are so influential to me. It's just like, man, their way of thinking is just, it's opened up my mind to a like I was living in such dread and such fear through COVID, and thinking like, what's the world coming to, and how am I gonna, I wanted to change the world. I wanted to help the world. I wanted to, help heal people. But it didn't take me long to realize I gotta figure out to heal myself first, because I was just trying to pass on healing to others because I hadn't healed myself yet. So, it's in progress, but at some point I hope to be, part of a community with guys like you that are, we're small players in the world. We're not the Joe Dispenzas or the Joe Rogans, but we're helping at a grassroots level to try and pass the word and the message. And I think it's not a bad place to be too. Like, you don't necessarily, like, I can't imagine the responsibility and the power of some of these individuals like Matthias DeStefano, who are sharing this message to millions of people across the world. It's a lot of power and a lot of responsibility. So kind of, thankfully, I'm just like a guy novice, just sort of starting out. And
who knows?
Who
knows where the world
But the
leads.
reality is, like, we're all equal though too. Like, that's the cool thing. Like, I was just hanging out with Robert Everett Grant for like 10 days. He's just a regular. He's a guy with a lot of like interesting gifts and abilities and talents. Mm-hmm. But we're all part of one. We're all connected, and that's part of the beauty, is sitting in front of you, looking at you, mirroring. It's just such a more refreshing way to live. And thinking about living in a world of community and connectedness and interbeing versus that world of competition and separation, thinking like, well, Kyle's podcast is better than mine. Who cares, right? Like, who cares at the end of the day? Who cares how many views? Like that. That's cool that you get a couple views. Never mind, you get 1,000. Maybe once you get to 5, whatever. Like, that's the number is a number, but the beauty in what you're providing and another opportunity for people to just sit down and express themselves and have a conversation, and maybe it will help some, maybe it won't. But,
Well, Gregg, I think we'll end with that. I just want to say I have really been looking forward to this opportunity, and I'm so glad that Dave came, and really appreciate your willingness to share your testimony and your journey as it's unfolding, and just a little bit about your Egypt trip, and definitely if you do go again, let me know. We'll go together. We'll bring our cameras, equipment, everything. We'll have an awesome podcast there.
I would say one thing for viewers, if they're interested in Egypt at all, and they haven't been exposed to Robert Edward Grant yet, he's got a series on Gaia TV, which is called Codex.
Codex, yep.
And I think you can watch probably the first episode for free on YouTube, and it disturbs me because there's actually YouTube wherever censored the Vitruvian Man. So it's so disturbing because they've got this blurry part on these private bits. And it's like, really? We have to censor a diagram from 500 years ago? So anyway, it's then I'd say if you pay the full subscription for Gaia, you can watch it uncensored. But it's a 10 episode series. And he's probably going to have another one. But it gets you sort of into that, his way of thinking and how he made these discoveries. And it also incorporates Alan Green, who is the Shakespeare expert we were talking about. And man, he's got such a compelling story on how Shakespeare also encoded the secrets of the pyramid within his cover on the sonnets and within that whole package of sonnets. And he goes through... he's actually going to have on Gaia TV, he's going to have a series of his own. He's just currently recording that right now. So there's going to be a lot of interesting
new content
cool
coming
information. It's just coming out every day for people if you're interested in exploring some of the different ideas and concepts other than the ones that we've been talking about, the Egyptology story. And there's some interesting stories, whether it's how true they are, whatever. It's just one facet, as Robert says. It's just and nobody knows the truth in anything because we're all set as eyes looking at different facets, and until you collect all those facets together, you get the whole truth. But when you and I are sitting together, when we're looking at something from different angles, we can see the same. We can see something differently, but it's from our perspective is different. You're looking from that way, I'm looking from this way, and it's only when we collaborate and combine our views together that we can encapsulate and discover the truth. So that's just to say that Gaia TV has some codex with Robert Edward Grant and then Alan Green is going to have some more information coming out. So.
Cool. We'll be looking forward to seeing that. Well, as always, just want to thank you, viewers. We love the Dispenza community. If you have any feedback or want to leave some comments in the video, please do so. We also have our dispenzachats@gmail.com email address. Feel free to send us feedback, questions. If you're interested in participating in a podcast with us, please send your request there. And Gregg, just want to say a big thank you to you again, brother. Much love. Wish you well. I wish you well on your journey, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Same to you.
All right. Take care.
All right.